I never thought I'd be that guy. You know, the one driving 2,000 miles across the country with nothing but hope in his chest and a surprise bouquet in the back seat, humming along to old country songs, thinking love could still be salvaged. But there I was, somewhere outside Flagstaff, windshield cracked, coffee gone cold, my heart pounding louder than the radio. I was on my way back home, or at least, what I still called home, to surprise my wife after 2 months away on an out-of-town project. But deep down, if I'm honest, it wasn't really a surprise I was chasing. It was reassurance. Something had been off for a while. The way her texts got shorter, how her calls went straight to voicemail more often. And when she did pick up, it was like she wasn't really there. But every time I asked if something was wrong, she'd smile through the screen and say, "Everything's fine, babe." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. So I didn't push. I thought maybe I'd been imagining things, maybe the distance was messing with my head. But as I crossed the Texas state line, a sick feeling started curling in my gut, growing with every mile. I couldn't shake it. Still, I kept driving. Because love makes you stubborn. Because history makes you hopeful. Because after 15 years together, you don't want to admit you might have become a stranger in your own marriage. By the time I pulled into our neighborhood in Plano, the sun was setting, casting that warm orange glow on the houses I knew so well. Our house looked the same from the outside. Porch light on. Her car in the driveway. Everything in its place. I killed the engine, grabbed the flowers, and climbed the steps, my heart beating like a war drum. I wasn't prepared for what I was about to find. I turned the key as quietly as I could, pushing the door open just enough to step inside. The house smelled like lavender and warm bread, familiar, comforting, but underneath, something felt wrong. There was a jacket draped over the arm of the couch. A pair of men's sneakers by the door. Not mine. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had a friend over. Maybe her brother stopped by. But the more I looked around, the harder it became to lie to myself. There was an extra coffee mug on the table. A phone charger I didn't recognize plugged into the wall. And then laughter. A deep, masculine laugh coming from upstairs. My hand tightened around the bouquet. My heart sank into my stomach. I stood there frozen, listening, unable to move, unable to breathe. Every step I'd driven, every mile I'd hoped, collapsed under me in that instant. And then came her voice, soft and playful, floating down from the bedroom, a voice I hadn't heard in months. Not like that. Not for me. I set the flowers down gently on the console table, my fingers numb, and walked toward the stairs. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through water. I didn't know what I'd find at the top, but I had to see. I had to know. Each step creaked louder than the last, a drumbeat of betrayal in my ears. And as I reached the landing, the bedroom door swung open. I don't know what I expected to see when that bedroom door swung open. Maybe part of me still hoped it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe some old friend of hers crashing for the night, or some explanation that wouldn't rip my insides apart. But no explanation came. No defense. Just him standing there, shirtless, towel slung around his neck, looking right at me like I was the intruder. And behind him, my wife, wrapped in the bedsheet, her hair tousled, flushed from whatever they'd been doing moments before. Her eyes widened for just a second, and then settled into something cold. Unapologetic. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "You're home." That was it. No panic, no guilt, no scrambling to cover up what couldn't be unseen. Just resignation. Like she'd been waiting for this moment, maybe even wanting it. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. My throat felt tight, my chest hollow. I just stared at them, at the two people who'd taken everything we'd built and turned it into this. And then I realized who he was. He wasn't just some random guy. No. I'd seen that smug face before. 100 times. Across the fence, holding a beer in one hand, waving with the other. He was Dan, our neighbor. The guy I lent tools to. The guy I helped jumpstart his car last winter. The guy who came over to watch the Cowboys game last Thanksgiving while his wife was visiting family out of town. Dan. My buddy. The betrayal hit like a second punch to the gut. I laughed then. A sharp, bitter sound that didn't even feel like it came from me. "Dan," I said, shaking my head. Of all people. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. My wife, no, the woman I thought was my wife, crossed her arms over her chest, the sheet slipping a little. "We didn't mean for it to happen," she said, as if that somehow made it better. It just did. I looked around the room. Our room. The photos on the wall. The comforter we'd picked out together. The lamp she said reminded her of her grandma's house. Every piece of it now felt like a lie. I backed away, down the stairs, out the front door, into the cool Texas night. My hands were shaking, but somehow I made it to the truck. Sat there gripping the wheel, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of a world that didn't make sense anymore. And then I started the engine. Because I wasn't going to sit there and cry on the driveway while they played house in my house. I had decisions to make. And revenge to plan. That night, I didn't sleep. I drove aimlessly for hours, the glow of gas stations and 24-hour diners flashing past like ghosts. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I pulled into a rest stop, killed the engine, and just sat there, staring at the dashboard, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. 15 years. 15 years of building a life with her. Every memory now felt poisoned, tainted. Every holiday, every lazy Sunday morning, every shared inside joke, all hollow now. I kept thinking back to all the times I defended her, all the times I brushed off little red flags because I trusted her. Trusted them both. I couldn't get Dan's face out of my head. The way he looked at me standing in that doorway. Not ashamed. Not even smug. Just indifferent. Like I was an inconvenience. And maybe that was the worst part. I sat there until the sky started to lighten, then I turned the truck back toward home. Not to see her. Not to fight. I wasn't even sure what for. I just knew I needed to be back. When I pulled into the driveway, Dan's truck was gone. Her car still sat there, silent under the morning sun. I walked inside. The house felt empty, cold. There were dishes in the sink. A half-finished glass of wine on the counter. A forgotten cardigan tossed over the arm of a chair. She was upstairs. I could hear her moving around, the sound of drawers opening and closing. She didn't expect me back so soon. I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. It didn't take long before she came downstairs, suitcase in hand. Her eyes widened again when she saw me sitting there. I didn't think, she started, then stopped. You leaving? I asked quietly. My voice didn't even sound like mine. She swallowed. I think it's best. I nodded. No fight left in me. Where are you going? Dance. Her answer was quick, almost mechanical. Of course. She looked around the kitchen like she was memorizing it. I didn't want it to end like this, she said. Neither did I. She hesitated, then opened the door, dragging the suitcase behind her. I watched her walk out of my life without a single backward glance. And for a second, I felt relief. Then, something else. Something sharper. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The house felt like a shell after she left. Every sound echoed too loudly. Every shadow seemed longer. I sat there for a long time, staring at the chair she used to sit in, the mug she left half empty. Funny how a place you called home for years could turn foreign overnight. But I didn't have time to wallow. Not anymore. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through contacts, and found the number I needed. My lawyer, Paul. We'd gone to college together, and though we hadn't talked much over the years, I knew he was the guy I wanted in my corner. Paul, I said when he picked up, my voice steady in a way I didn't feel. I need to file for divorce. Today. There was a pause. Jake? You okay? No, I admitted. But I will be. We set up a meeting for noon. In the meantime, I gathered everything I could. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies. Every paper trail I could think of. I didn't want her getting a single dime more than she deserved. When I met Paul at his office in downtown Plano, I laid it all out. He listened quietly, occasionally jotting notes. You've got a solid case, he said finally. Especially since she left willingly. And with the neighbor, no less. Judges don't love that. I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. But even as I was sitting there planning my legal counterattack, a darker part of me whispered for something more. Not just justice. Revenge. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I made a call I never thought I'd make to Lena, Dan's wife. Lena, I said when she answered. We need to talk. There was silence on the other end. Then a quiet, wary, Jake. Yeah, I think you deserve to know what's been going on. Another pause. Then, heartbreak in her voice. You too? Yeah, I whispered. Me too. We met that night at a small diner off the highway. She looked tired. Hollow. Like someone who'd cried so long she couldn't cry anymore. I slid a manila folder across the table, screenshots, photos, timelines. Proof. I've been keeping this for a while, I said. Didn't want to believe it. But now, well, now it's yours too. She stared at it for a long moment, then pushed it aside. I don't need it, she murmured. I already knew. I just didn't want to admit it. I nodded. Same. We sat there for a while in silence, two strangers bound by betrayal. And then, slowly, a plan began to form between us. We weren't just going to walk away. We were going to make them regret it. We sat in that diner for hours, Lena and I, sipping coffee gone cold, the weight of our shared betrayal settling between us like a third person at the table. Every time I thought I'd run out of things to say, another bitter truth bubbled up. Every time she wiped at her tired eyes, I felt that familiar ache of someone who'd been chosen last in their own marriage. Do you know how long it's been? I finally asked her. She sighed, staring out the window at the dark highway. I think it started last summer. He stopped coming home on time. Started leaving his phone face down. Always smelled like hotel soap. She laughed bitterly. I used to think he was cheating with someone from work. Never imagined it was. She trailed off, shaking her head. Same here, I said. I trusted him. Trusted her. The two people I thought would never. I couldn't even finish. Lena's lips pressed into a thin line. You know what the worst part is? She whispered. They made us feel crazy. Every time I questioned him, he'd act like I was paranoid. Like I was the problem. I nodded slowly. Same playbook. For a while, we sat in silence. Then Lena straightened in her seat. I'm not just going to let them win, Jake. I've spent years taking care of that man, supporting his career, raising his kids while he ran around playing hero in the neighborhood. He doesn't get to throw me away like trash. Her words lit something in me. You know, I said carefully, I've been thinking. They've been playing house behind our backs. Maybe it's time we let them live with the consequences. She raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I leaned in. Your house. My house. The kids. The bills. The reality. They've been sneaking around like it's some romantic movie. Let's see how fun it is when it's not stolen moments in a bedroom, but real life. Let them deal with it. Slowly, Lena smiled. A tired, knowing smile. Make them face what they built. Exactly. We left the diner that night with a plan. We wouldn't scream. We wouldn't beg. We would let them have each other. And watch them drown. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. Every morning I woke up in the house that no longer felt like mine. The silence pressed in heavier than ever. Her perfume still lingered on the pillows, her toothbrush still sat by the sink, but she hadn't come back. She hadn't even called. I spent those first few days getting my ducks in a row. Met with Paul again. Froze joint accounts. Canceled shared credit cards. Filed the paperwork to officially put the house solely in my name, something I'd started months ago when refinancing. A lucky move I never thought would matter. Now it mattered more than anything. Meanwhile, Lena followed through on her end. Quietly moved money from their accounts into one under her name. Got a temporary custody order for their 2 kids. She wasn't playing games anymore. And as if fate wanted to twist the knife just a little deeper, Dan showed up on my doorstep 3 days later. I heard his knock, saw him standing there like nothing was wrong, like we were still neighbors who shared beers over the fence. Jake, he said, almost casual, can we talk? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Talk? After everything? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, man. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. It just did. I let out a hollow laugh. Yeah, that's what she said too. That it just happened. Funny how you two used the same script. Dan shifted uncomfortably. Look, I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to, let Emily stay here a bit. Just until we figure things out. I stared at him, stunned. You kicked her out already? She didn't tell you? His face twisted. She didn't want to stay with me. Said she needed space. Said she wasn't sure about us. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to process it. After blowing up our lives, after throwing away 2 marriages, she was already wavering? No, Dan, I said quietly. She can't stay here. This house? This house is mine now. And you? You can figure out where she belongs. I closed the door in his face. I don't know how long I stood behind that door, my forehead pressed to the wood, breathing hard. But when I stepped away, something inside felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one losing everything. They were. The next morning, I woke up to silence, but this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Like the house was finally starting to breathe again without her presence lingering in every corner. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I had a dozen emails from Paul about the divorce filings, financial updates, and court dates. I read through them slowly, methodically, feeling like I was pulling threads out of a tangled web, each one loosening the knot she and Dan had left behind. Then came the message that made me pause, an email from Lena. Jake, it read, just wanted to give you a heads up. Dan's trying to file for primary custody. Says you're unstable. Says Emily wants to help him testify. Just thought you should know before it blindsides you. I stared at the screen, a cold wave washing over me. Unstable. That was their angle now. Of course. When manipulation failed, they'd move to discredit. But they didn't know how prepared I'd been. I picked up my phone and called Lena. Thanks for the warning, I said quietly. He's desperate, she replied. Trying to make me look unfit too. Dragging me through the mud. They're scrambling, I said. They're realizing fantasy doesn't pay the bills. She chuckled bitterly. You still up for this plan? More than ever. That afternoon, I met with Paul again. Showed him Lena's message. He frowned, but then nodded. We'll get ahead of it. You've got records. You've got proof. And frankly, you're the one keeping things together. It was strange realizing how much strength I'd been quietly carrying. For so long, I'd played the dependable husband, the guy who handled the boring stuff, who kept the lights on and the mortgage paid. She never saw that as valuable. Now it was the very thing that was saving me. Later that evening, I stood out on the porch, looking across the street at Dan's house. His blinds were closed. No lights on. No sign of Emily. I wondered if they were fighting. I wondered if she was already questioning her choice. And for the first time in weeks, I felt no sadness thinking of her. Only a quiet, steady resolve. They built their house of cards. And now it was time to watch it fall. The next few weeks felt like a strange kind of war. Quiet on the surface, but every day a new battle underneath. Papers filed. Lawyers called. Accusations traded through official channels. Emily didn't call me directly, she let her lawyer's letters speak for her. And each one felt colder than the last. She wanted alimony. She wanted half of everything. She wanted to claim emotional distress because I had supposedly been distant, neglectful, uncaring. I read the accusations with a strange numbness. This was the same woman who once held my hand through funerals, who decorated the Christmas tree barefoot at midnight, who sat beside me on hospital benches while we waited for biopsy results. And now she was painting me as some cold-hearted villain. But the thing about being underestimated is, it gives you power. Paul had already gathered everything. Records of every payment I'd made, every home improvement I'd funded, every bill I'd covered while she worked late. Lena had provided screenshots of texts between Emily and Dan, laughing about how easy it was to keep me in the dark. We weren't just building a defense. We were laying out a quiet, devastating offense. And then came the twist I never saw coming. I was sitting in Paul's office, going over the latest documents, when his phone buzzed. He frowned, read a message, and then looked up at me. "Jake," he said carefully, "you're going to want to see this." He handed me his phone. It was a news article. Local headline. Plano man arrested for embezzlement. Faces 20 years. I stared at the photo. It was Dan. Apparently, Dan had been skimming from his company for years. A quiet fraud that had finally caught up to him. Police raided his house that morning. I let out a slow breath, leaning back in the chair. "Well," I murmured. "Looks like karma showed up early." Paul chuckled. "This changes things." "Yeah," I said, still staring at the screen. "It really does." I wasn't sure what Emily's next move would be. But suddenly, the world she'd thrown everything away for? It was crumbling faster than she could run. It was strange, watching someone else's life unravel in real time. I didn't have to wonder long what Emily would do. That afternoon, she called me. For the first time since she walked out, her name flashed across my phone. I let it ring twice before answering. "Jake." Her voice was shaky. "Did you hear?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, looking out the window. "About Dan," I said calmly. "Yeah, I heard." A pause. I didn't know." "Didn't know what, Emily?" I asked. "That the guy you threw everything away for was a fraud? That he built his life on lies?" She let out a shaky breath. "I swear, Jake, I didn't." I cut her off gently. "You didn't want to know. That's different." Another silence. Then smaller. I don't know where to go. There it was. The line I'd been waiting for. The moment when the fantasy collapsed and reality came knocking. "Not here," I said. "Not anymore. Jake, please." "No," I said quietly. "You made your choice. You left. You burned it all down. I'm not rebuilding it for you." I hung up. My hands trembled a little as I set the phone down. But it wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't rage. It was peace. Later that evening, Lena texted me. She's been calling me too. Crying. Begging. Asking if she can stay with me and the boys. I told her no. I stared at the message, then typed back. Good. Let her feel it. We didn't need revenge. Not really. Life was delivering it better than we ever could. I stepped out onto the porch again, feeling the cool night air against my skin. Across the street, Dan's house was dark, empty. A foreclosure notice had been taped to the front door earlier that day. Their beautiful mess had collapsed faster than I imagined. And me? I was still standing, not untouched, not unscarred, but standing. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to start over. A few months passed. Life didn't magically fix itself, but it settled into something quieter, steadier, the kind of peace that comes not from forgetting the pain, but from surviving it. The divorce was finalized in the spring. She didn't fight in the end. Maybe because she'd run out of strength. Maybe because the life she chased turned out emptier than she imagined. Either way, she signed the papers without another word. I kept the house. She walked away with almost nothing. Dan lost his job, his reputation, his family. Lena sold their house and moved closer to her parents with the boys. We still talked now and then, two people who'd shared a strange, painful chapter. One evening, I stood in the backyard, watching the sun set over the fence. The same fence Dan used to lean on. The same fence where I'd once handed him cold beers, thinking we were friends. Funny how a simple line of wood could divide so much more than property. I thought about all the nights I spent wondering what I'd done wrong. The self-blame. The doubts. And I realized I hadn't failed. They had. They'd failed themselves. Because no affair, no secret, no fleeting thrill lasts forever. Because sooner or later, the truth shows up. And when it does, you either stand in it, or you drown. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift, little by little. Then I went inside, closed the door behind me, and finally, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home.